In the sleepy village of St. Mary Mead, a stolen sapphire sparks chaos at Willow Manor, but Miss Jane Marple knows it's a lie. When Charles is poisoned and Dr. Pennington's death looks like suicide, the sharp-eyed spinster digs deeper. A cryptic letter warns of murder, and a hidden passage hides clues of blue beads, green threads, and a butler's dark secret. With her knack for noticing little things, Miss Marple traps the cunning killer, Mr. Travers, who staged it all for revenge. And a hidden fortune. Will she unravel the truth before more die? Dive into her most shocking case yet. Chapter 1. The Village Whisperesti. Mary Mead was a quiet little place, tucked among green hills and winding lanes. Its cottages, with their neat gardens, looked like they belonged in a picture book. Miss Jane Marple sat by her window, knitting, a soft pink scarf. Her sharp eyes, though, weren't on the needles. They were watching the village street, where something odd was brewing. It was a bright Tuesday morning, and Miss Marple had just finished her tea when Mrs. Price, the postmistress, hurried by, clutching a stack of papers. Her face was pink with excitement, which wasn't like her. Miss Marple leaned forward. "Something's up," she murmured to herself, her fingers pausing on the yarn. She knew that village gossip was about to spill. Sure enough, Mrs. Price stopped at the bakery, waving a copy of the St. Mary Mead Gazette. Miss Marple's neighbor, young Tommy from the grocer's shop, dashed out to grab one. His eyes widened as he read. Then he ran off, shouting to his friends. Miss Marple set her knitting down. "Time for a stroll," she said, grabbing her hat. The village square was buzzing when she got there. People crowded around the notice board outside the post office, chattering like sparrows. Miss Marple, with her kind smile and gray hair tucked under her hat, slipped through the group. She looked harmless, like any old lady who loved gardening and tea. But her mind was sharp as a tack, always catching the little things others missed. On the notice board was a new page from the Gazette. It wasn't the usual boring stuff about church fairs or lost cats. In big bold letters, it read, "A secret will be revealed at Willow Manor, Friday, 7 p.m. All are welcome." No name, no explanation, just that. The words sent a shiver through the crowd. "Willow Manor," gasped Mrs. Bantry, Miss Marple's friend, who had just arrived with her basket of apples. "That's Mrs. Harcourt's place. She never invites anyone." What secret could she mean? Miss Marple tilted her head, reading the notice again. Willow Manor was a grand old house on the edge of St. Mary Mead, hidden behind tall hedges. Mrs. Evelyn Harcourt, its owner, was rich but kept to herself. Some said she was snooty. Others thought she was just shy. Either way, she rarely mixed with the village. A public invitation was as strange as snow in July. "Curious," Miss Marple said softly. "Very curious indeed." Her eyes twinkled. She loved a puzzle, and this one felt like the start of something big. By Thursday, the whole village was talking about the notice. At the tea shop, Miss Marple sipped her Earl Grey and listened. Mr. Pye, the fussy antiques dealer, thought it was about money. "Mrs. Harcourt's got a fortune hidden somewhere," he whispered loudly. "Bet she's finally sharing it." Mrs. Clement, the vicar's wife, shook her head. "It's probably a charity event. She's not that generous, though." Tommy, delivering bread, chimed in. "I heard her nephew's back. Maybe it's about him." Miss Marple didn't say much, but she stored every word in her mind. She knew gossip was like a jigsaw puzzle. Pieces that seemed useless often fit together later. She thought of her old friend, Mrs. McGillicuddy, who once saw something odd on a train and turned out to be right. Villages, Miss Marple knew, hid secrets under their cozy surface. Friday evening came, and St. Mary Mead was alive with excitement. Miss Marple put on her best coat, a soft blue one, and walked to Willow Manor. The air was cool, and the sky glowed pink as the sun set. Other villagers joined her, their footsteps crunching on the gravel path. Mrs. Bantry caught up, her eyes bright. "Jane, do you think this is trouble?" she asked. "Perhaps," Miss Marple said, smiling. "But trouble often shows us the truth." Willow Manor loomed ahead, its stone walls covered in ivy, its windows glowed with golden light, making it look warm but mysterious. The big oak door was open, and a tall man in a neat suit stood there. It was Mr. Travers, Mrs. Harcourt's butler. His face was stiff, like he wasn't happy about the crowd. "This way, please," he said, his voice flat. Inside, the manor was grand but old. The air smelled of polished wood and roses. A chandelier sparkled above a long table, set with tea and cakes. About 20 villagers had come, plus a few strangers. Miss Marple noticed them right away. There was a young woman with dark hair and quick eyes, wearing a plain but elegant dress. She stood near the fireplace, looking nervous. A man with a tweed jacket and a sunburned face was studying a painting on the wall, and a young man with slick hair and a cocky grin was whispering to Mrs. Harcourt. "That's Charles, her nephew," Mrs. Bantry whispered to Miss Marple. "He's been away for years. Bit of a troublemaker, I hear." Miss Marple nodded, watching Charles. He had a restless way about him, like a cat waiting to pounce. The young woman by the fireplace glanced at him, then looked away fast. The man, in tweed, kept to himself, but his eyes darted around. Miss Marple's fingers itched for her knitting. People, she thought, were like stitches pull one thread. And the whole pattern showed. Mrs. Harcourt entered, and the room went quiet. She was tall, with silver hair and a sharp face. Her dress was dark green, expensive but old-fashioned. She stood at the head of the table, her hands clasped. "Thank you for coming," she said, her voice cold but clear. "I invited you to settle a matter that has troubled me for too long." The villagers leaned forward. Miss Marple sat near the back, her hands folded, but her eyes missed nothing. Mrs. Harcourt's fingers were tight, her knuckles white. She was nervous, Miss Marple thought, but trying to hide it. "There is a thief among us," Mrs. Harcourt said suddenly. Gasps filled the room. "The Harcourt sapphire, my family's greatest treasure, is gone, stolen, right from my safe, and I know one of you took it." The crowd erupted in whispers. Mr. Pye's mouth dropped open. Mrs. Clement clutched her handbag. Tommy, standing by the door, looked thrilled, like he was in a detective story. Miss Marple stayed calm, but her mind was racing. A theft, that was bad enough. But something in Mrs. Harcourt's voice, a tremble, maybe made her think there was more to this. "Who's she accusing?" Mrs. Bantry hissed. "I'm not sure yet," Miss Marple whispered back, "but she's watching someone." Mrs. Harcourt's eyes locked on the young woman by the fireplace. "Miss Lydia Gray," she said sharply. "My governess, you were seen near the safe last night." Lydia's face went pale. I wasn't," she stammered. "I was in my room, reading." "I swear." "Liar," Charles snapped, stepping forward. "I saw you sneaking around, Lydia. What were you doing?" The room buzzed again. Lydia's eyes filled with tears, but she stood straight. "I didn't take anything," she said. "You're wrong, Charles." Miss Marple watched closely. Lydia's hands were shaking, but her voice was firm. Charles, though, had a gleam in his eye, like he enjoyed the fight. "The man in tweed, Dr. Pennington," someone whispered, shifted uncomfortably. "Mr. Travers." The butler stood like a statue, but Miss Marple caught him glancing at Lydia. It was quick, but it was there. Mrs. Harcourt raised a hand. "Enough," she said. "I called you here to expose the truth. The sapphire is worth a fortune, and I will find it. Until then, no one leaves this house." The villagers gasped again. "What?" Mr. Pye squeaked. "You can't keep us here." "I can," Mrs. Harcourt said. "The police are on their way. Inspector Craddock will sort this out." Miss Marple's lips twitched. She knew Inspector Craddock, good man, but he sometimes missed the small stuff. She leaned back, her mind like a spider web, catching every word and look. Lydia's fear, Charles's anger, Dr. Pennington's silence, Mr. Travers' glance said, all meant something. She thought of a time in St. Mary Mead, when a girl was accused of stealing, only to find the real thief was someone nobody suspected. Villages, she knew, were full of secrets. The tea and cakes sat untouched. The air was thick with tension. Mrs. Bantry leaned close. "Jane, this is mad. A stolen sapphire. A locked house. It's like one of your stories. Not mine, Miss Marple said softly. But it's a story, all right. And we're only at the start. She looked around the room again. Lydia was wiping her eyes. Charles was pacing. Dr. Pennington was writing something in a small notebook. Mr. Travers was clearing cups, his face blank, and Mrs. Harcourt stood tall, but her hands were still tight. Miss Marple's eyes narrowed. A theft was bad, but she had a feeling, a prickly, uneasy feeling, that this was bigger than a missing gem. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the windows. The chandelier flickered. Tommy, still by the door, whispered to a friend, "This is getting creepy." Miss Marple didn't disagree. She thought of the notice. A secret will be revealed. Was the sapphire the secret? Or was it something else, something darker? She settled back in her chair, her kind old face hiding a mind that was already untangling the threads. Whatever happened tonight, Miss Marple was ready to find the truth. And in St. Mary Mead, the truth always came out, one way or another. Chapter 2. The Missing Sapphire. The drawing room at Willow Manor buzzed like a beehive. The villagers' whispers bounced off the high ceilings, mixing with the clink of teacups Mr. Travers was clearing away. Miss Jane Marple sat quietly in her corner, her blue coat folded neatly over her lap. Her eyes, bright and sharp behind her gentle smile, darted from face to face. Mrs. Harcourt's bombshell about the stolen sapphire had set everyone on edge, and Miss Marple knew that nervous people often let secrets slip. Mrs. Evelyn Harcourt stood by the fireplace, her green dress catching the light. Her face was like stone, but her fingers twisted a silk handkerchief. "The police will be here soon," she said again, her voice sharp. "No one leaves until Inspector Craddock searches the house." "That's ridiculous." Mr. Pye, the antiques dealer, sputtered, his round face red. "I didn't take your silly gem. I came for tea, not trouble." He waved his hands, knocking over a sugar bowl. Sugar spilled across the table, and Miss Marple noticed Mr. Travers frown as he swept it up. "Calm down, Pye," said Charles, Mrs. Harcourt's nephew, leaning against the wall. His slick hair gleamed, and his grin was too smug for Miss Marple's liking. "If you're innocent, you've got nothing to worry about." He glanced at Lydia Gray, the governess, who stood alone by a window. Unlike some people, Lydia's head snapped up, her dark eyes flashed. "I told you, I didn't steal anything." Her voice shook, but she held her chin high. Miss Marple watched her closely. Lydia's hands were clasped tight, her knuckles pale. Scared, Miss Marple thought, but not guilty. Not yet, anyway. Mrs. Bantry, sitting next to Miss Marple, leaned close. "Jane, this is a mess. A sapphire worth a fortune, gone, and Lydia accused it. She's such a sweet girl." "Sweet doesn't mean innocent," Miss Marple murmured, her voice soft as a breeze. "But I don't think Miss Gray is a thief. Something's off." She thought of a time in St. Mary Mead when a maid was blamed for stealing a brooch, only for it to turn up in someone else's drawer. People, she knew, loved to point fingers. The man in the tweed jacket, Dr. Pennington. The archaeologist cleared his throat. He'd been quiet so far, standing near a bookshelf, his sunburned face half hidden in shadow. "Mrs. Harcourt," he said, his voice deep and careful. "How do you know the sapphire was stolen tonight? Maybe it's been gone for days." The room went still. Mrs. Harcourt's eyes narrowed. "I checked the safe this morning," she said. "It was there, locked tight. Only I have the key." She patted her dress pocket, where a faint jingle sounded. Miss Marple's eyebrows lifted slightly. "A key," she thought. "That's interesting." She noticed Dr. Pennington's hand pause on the book. He was holding a thick one about ancient treasures. His fingers tapped the cover, like he was thinking hard. She filed that away in her mind, like a note in her knitting bag. "Then someone broke into the safe," Charles said, crossing his arms. "Or someone knew the combination." He looked at Lydia again, his grin sharp. "You're always poking around the house, aren't you?" "Stop it, Charles," Lydia snapped. "I was hired to teach your cousin's children, not to snoop. I've never touched that safe." Her voice cracked, and she turned to the window, her shoulders trembling. Miss Marple felt a pang of pity. Lydia reminded her of a young girl in St. Mary Mead, accused of gossip but innocent. Still, Lydia's quick temper was a clue. People who got angry fast often hid something, not always a crime, but maybe a secret. Mr. Travers, the butler, moved silently around the room, his face blank as a wall. He refilled a teapot, but Miss Marple caught his eyes flick to Mrs. Harcourt's pocket. It was quick, like a moth's flutter, but she saw it. She also noticed his shoes polished, but with a smudge of mud on one heel. Odd, she thought, for a man so neat. Had he been outside? Mrs. Clement, the vicar's wife, spoke up, her voice wobbly. This is dreadful, a theft in St. Mary Mead. We're honest folk, maybe. Maybe it's a mistake. Could the sapphire have been misplaced? Mrs. Harcourt gave her a cold look. The Harcourt sapphire is not something you misplace, Mrs. Clement. It's a blue gem, big as a robin's egg, passed down for generations. It's worth more than this house. The villagers gasped. Tommy, the grocer's boy, whispered to his friend, "That's a lot of money." Miss Marple smiled faintly. Money, she knew, made people do strange things. She thought of a St. Mary Mead farmer who fought his brother over a few pounds. A sapphire like that, it could turn friends into enemies. "Let's not panic," Dr. Pennington said, stepping forward. "Mrs. Harcourt, can we see the safe? Maybe there's a clue." His voice was calm, but Miss Marple noticed his eyes sharp, like he was hunting for something. Mrs. Harcourt hesitated, then nodded. "Very well. Follow me." She led the group to a small study off the drawing room. The walls were lined with old books, and a heavy desk sat in the corner. Behind it was a painting of a stern man in a wig, probably a Harcourt ancestor. Mrs. Harcourt pushed the painting aside, revealing a small metal safe built into the wall. The door was shut, but a tiny scratch mark glinted near the lock. Miss Marple slipped closer, her small frame letting her blend in. She peered at the scratch. Fresh, she thought, made with something sharp, like a knife. She glanced at the suspects. Charles had a pocket knife. He'd been fiddling with it earlier, but so did Tommy, who carried one for deliveries. And Dr. Pennington, his bag, slung over his shoulder, looked heavy enough to hold tools. "The safe was locked when I opened it tonight," Mrs. Harcourt said. "The sapphire was gone. Nothing else was touched." She opened the safe now, using a key from her pocket. Inside was a velvet box, empty. A few papers sat beside it, but nothing else. Miss Marple's eyes narrowed. An empty box, she thought. Why leave it behind? She noticed a faint smudge on the safe's edged arc, like soot. She looked at Mr. Travers, who stood nearby. His hands were clean, but that mud on his shoe nagged at her. She also saw Lydia staring at the safe, her face pale. Did she know something? "This is a job for the police," Mr. Pye said, mopping his forehead with a handkerchief. "I don't like this. Locked rooms, stolen gems, it's like a bad novel." Mrs. Bantry nudged Miss Marple. "He's not wrong, Jane, but you're good at this sort of thing. Any ideas?" "Not yet," Miss Marple said, her voice mild. "But people leave traces, Dolly, always." She thought of a St. Mary Mead case, where a stolen watch was found because of a smudged fingerprint. Little things, she knew, told big stories. The group returned to the drawing room, where the air felt heavier. Outside, rain began to patter against the windows. Tommy whispered, "Hope the police hurry. This place is spooky." Miss Marple sat down again, her mind like a puzzle board. She watched the suspects. Charles was joking with Mr. Pye, but his eyes kept sliding to Lydia. Lydia sat alone, twisting a ring on her finger. Dr. Pennington was back by the bookshelf, reading that book on treasures. And Mr. Travers, he was pouring tea, but his movements were too careful, like he was listening to every word. Mrs. Harcourt spoke again. "Until the police arrive, I want everyone to stay calm. The sapphire is gone, but it's in this house. I'm sure of it." "How?" Mrs. Clement asked, her eyes wide. "No one's left." "Exactly," Mrs. Harcourt said. "The thief is here, among us." The room went quiet. Miss Marple felt a chill, not from the rain, but from the truth in those words. She looked at Mrs. Harcourt's face hard, but with a flicker of fear. Was she hiding something too? Miss Marple thought of a Mary Mead, widow who lied to protect her son. Families, she knew, kept secrets tight. She turned her gaze to the others. Charles's cocky grin didn't match his tense shoulders. Lydia's ring twisting was nervous, but her eyes were steady. When she looked at Mrs. Harcourt, Dr. Pennington's book was open, but he wasn't reading. He was watching the room. And Mr. Travers, moving like a shadow, had that smudge of mud. Each one, Miss Marple thought, was a thread in a tangled knot. The clock struck 8. Its chime loud in the silence. Mrs. Bantry shivered. "Jane, I don't like this. A thief among us. It's creepy. It's human," Miss Marple said softly. "And humans make mistakes." She thought of the scratch on the safe, the smudge, the mud. Small clues, but they'd grow bigger. They always did. A knock at the door made everyone jump. Mr. Travers opened it, and Inspector Craddock stepped in, rain dripping from his coat. "Evening, folks," he said, his voice firm. "I hear we've got a theft. Let's get to work." Miss Marple smiled faintly. Craddock was smart, but he'd need her help. She settled back, her eyes still moving, catching every glance and fidget. The sapphire was gone, but the real mystery, she felt, was just beginning. And in St. Mary Mead, mysteries always led to the truth. Chapter 3. Shadows of the Past. The rain tapped hard against Willow Manor's windows, making the drawing room feel smaller and stuffier. Miss Jane Marple sat near the fire, her hands folded neatly in her lap. Inspector Craddock was in the study with Mrs. Harcourt, looking at the empty safe. The villagers whispered among themselves, their faces tight with worry. A stolen sapphire was bad enough, but being stuck in this big, creaky house with a thief, that was worse. Not Miss Marple's eyes moved slowly, like a cat watching mice. Charles, Mrs. Harcourt's nephew, slouched in a chair, tossing a coin and catching it. His grin was gone, replaced by a restless frown. Lydia Gray, the governess, stood by a bookcase, her dark hair falling over her face as she pretended to read. Dr. Pennington, the archaeologist, sat alone, scribbling in his notebook, and Mr. Travers, the butler, glided around, clearing plates, with his usual blank face. Miss Marple noticed his shoes again, still that smudge of mud. It nagged at her, like a loose stitch in her knitting dot. Mrs. Bantry, her friend, leaned close, her voice low. "Jane, this is getting spooky. A thief in the room. I don't trust anyone here. Nor should you," Miss Marple said softly, her smile kind, but her eyes sharp. "People hide things, Dolly, always." She thought of a St. Mary Mead shopkeeper who smiled at customers but cheated on his taxes. Faces, she knew, were like masks. Inspector Craddock came back, his coat damp from the rain. "Right," he said, his voice loud in the quiet room. "Mrs. Harcourt's shown me the safe. Clean job, no forced lock. Someone knew how to open it, or had a key. I'll need to talk to each of you." The villagers groaned. Mr. Pye, the antiques dealer, waved his handkerchief. "This is outrageous. I'm no criminal." His voice squeaked, and Miss Marple noticed his hands shaking. Nervous, she thought. "But why?" "Let's stay calm," Craddock said. "I'll start with you, Mrs. Harcourt. The rest of you, sit tight." He nodded to a young policeman by the door, who stood straight, watching the crowd. Mrs. Harcourt swept out, her green dress rustling. Charles muttered something rude, and Lydia flinched. Miss Marple watched her closely. Lydia's fingers gripped the book. She held, a thin one, probably poetry. Her eyes, though, weren't on the pages. They darted to Charles, then away. Scared of him, Miss Marple thought, or hiding something. With Craddock gone, the room buzzed again. Mrs. Clement, the vicar's wife, whispered to Tommy, the grocer's boy, "I heard the Harcourt family's cursed. That sapphire brought nothing but trouble." Tommy's eyes widened, thrilled by the idea. Miss Marple tilted her head, listening. Gossip, she knew, was like a river, muddy, but full of treasures. She stood, her small frame barely noticed, and moved toward Mrs. Clement. "Accursed, you say?" she asked, her voice gentle, like she was chatting about flowers. Mrs. Clement nodded, eager to share. "Oh yes, Miss Marple. My husband heard it from old Mr. Giles, who worked at Willow Manor years ago. The sapphire came from India, they say." stolen from a temple. Every Harcourt who owned it had bad luck, sickness, fights, even death. Miss Marple's eyes twinkled. Fancy that, she said. And Mr. Harcourt, Evelyn's husband, did he have bad luck? Mrs. Clement leaned closer, her voice a whisper. He died young, didn't he? Heart attack, they said, but some thought it was the curse, and he hid a fortune somewhere, gold, maybe, or jewels. The sapphire was the key to finding it. Miss Marple nodded, her mind clicking like a clock. A hidden fortune, that was new. She thought of a St. Mary Mead widow who hid her savings in a teapot, afraid of thieves. People with money, she knew, got paranoid. She glanced at Charles, tossing his coin. Did he know about this fortune? Or Lydia, who was listening now, her book forgotten? Thank you, Mrs. Clement, Miss Marple said, patting her arm. Such interesting stories. She moved away, her steps slow, but her brain was racing. A cursed sapphire, a hidden fortunate, sounded like a fairy tale, but fairy tales often hid ugly truths. She stopped near Lydia, who was staring out the rainy window. A chilly night, Miss Marple said, her voice warm. You must be tired, dear, with all this fuss. Lydia jumped, then smiled weakly. I'm fine, Miss Marple, just worried. I didn't take the sapphire, I swear. Of course, Miss Marple said, her tone soothing. But it's hard, being accused. Reminds me of a girl in my village, blamed for stealing a ring. Turned out, she was just protecting her brother. She watched Lydia's face, looking for a flicker. Lydia's eyes widened, then dropped. I'm not protecting anyone, she said quickly. Too quickly, Miss Marple thought. I just want this to be over. Miss Marple nodded, patting Lydia's hand. It will be, dear. She moved on, but her mind held on to Lydia's words. Protecting someone. Maybe not, but Lydia knew something. Her nervous eyes, her quick answers, they were clues, like crumbs on a path. She sat near Dr. Pennington, who was still writing in his notebook. You're fond of books, sir? She asked, her voice curious, but harmless. He looked up, his sunburned face wary. Just notes, he said, closing the book fast. I study old treasures, Miss Marple, she said, smiling. Jane Marple, treasures, you say, like the sapphire. He shrugged, but his fingers tapped the notebook. It's a fine gem, but not my field. I dig up pots and statues, not jewels. His voice was calm, but Miss Marple caught a tightness in it. She thought of a St. Mary Mead man who lied about his fishing trips, but his twitching hands gave him away. Fascinating, she said. Have you been to India? I hear the sapphires from there. Dr. Pennington's eyes flicked to hers, then away. Egypt, mostly, he said. Never India. He stood, moving to the fireplace, his back to her. Miss Marple's lips twitched. A lie, she thought, or half a lie. She noticed his bag, left on the chair. It was heavy, with a bulge that could be tools or something else. She filed that away, like a pattern in her knitting. Charles was talking to Mr. Pye now, his voice loud. This is a waste of time. Aunt Evelyn's just stirring trouble. That sapphire's probably in her jewelry box, and she forgot. Mr. Pye shook his head. It's worth a fortune. Boy, you don't forget something like that. He lowered his voice, but Miss Marple heard. Your uncle hid money, didn't he? Maybe the sapphires, a clue. Charles laughed, but it was sharp. Old stories, Pye. Uncle was a miser, not a pirate. His eyes slid to Mrs. Harcourt, who was back now, talking to Craddock. Miss Marple watched his face. Greed, or fear, she wasn't sure yet. Mr. Travers passed by, carrying a tray. Miss Marple smiled at him. You must be tired, Mr. Travers, with all this chaos. He paused, his face blank. It's my job, ma'am, he said, but his voice was flat. She noticed his hand steady, but with a faint scar on one knuckle. A fighter, maybe, long ago. And that mud on his shoe, still there. She thought of a St. Mary Mead gardener, caught stealing because of dirt on his boots. Little things, she knew, mattered. Craddock called Lydia next, and she went to the study, her steps slow. The room buzzed louder. Tommy whispered to his friend, bet she did it. She's sneaky. Mrs. Bantry frowned. Jane, Lydia's no thief, but Charles, he's trouble. Maybe, Miss Marple said, her voice soft, but trouble comes in many shapes. She thought of the Harcourt family curses, fortunes, secrets. She needed more pieces to this puzzle. She stood, moving to the tea table, where Mrs. Clement was nibbling a biscuit. Mrs. Clement, she said, you mentioned Mr. Harcourt's fortune. Did anyone ever look for it? Mrs. Clement's eyes lit up. Oh yes. After he died, people said he hid it in the house, maybe in a secret room. Charles was just a boy then, but he used to poke around, looking for it. Never found anything though. Miss Marple nodded. A secret room. She thought of a St. Mary Mead house with a hidden cupboard, found by chance. Willow Manor was old. Old houses loved secrets. She glanced at Charles, who was watching Lydia come back from the study. His face was hard now, no grin. Did he still hunt for that fortune? Lydia sat down, her face pale. Craddock called Dr. Pennington next. Miss Marple watched him go, his notebook tucked under his arm. She thought of his quick answer about India, his heavy bag. Was he after the sapphire, or something else? The rain grew louder, and the clock struck 9. Mrs. Bantry shivered. Jane, this feels wrong. A stolen gem, a cursed family, it's like a ghost story. Not ghosts, Miss Marple said, her eyes on the room. Just people, and people, Dolly, always leave clues. She thought of the mud, the scar, the notebook, Lydia's quick words. The sapphire was gone, but the real mystery, she felt, was deeper. A fortune, a family, a lie. She'd find the truth, thread by thread. The fire crackled, and Miss Marple settled back, her kind face hiding a mind like a trap. In St. Mary Mead, secrets never stayed buried long. Chapter 4. A body in the garden. The rain had slowed to a drizzle, but Willow Manor's drawing room felt colder than ever. Miss Jane Marple sat by the window, her hands resting on her lap, her eyes sharp despite her gentle smile. The villagers were restless, their whispers like leaves rustling in the wind. Inspector Craddock was still in the study, questioning Dr. Pennington about the stolen Harcourt sapphire. The air was thick with worry. Thief was bad, but being locked in this big house with one was worse. Miss Marple watched the suspects. Lydia Gray, the governess, sat stiffly, her fingers twisting her ring. Her face was pale after her talk with Craddock, but her eyes were steady. Dr. Pennington had just returned, his tweed jacket damp, his notebook tucked away. Mr. Travers, the butler, moved quietly, serving tea with his blank face, but Miss Marple noticed that smudge of mud on his shoe again. And Charles, Mrs. Harcourt's nephew, he was gone. He'd slipped out a side door 10 minutes ago, muttering about needing air. Miss Marple didn't like that. Restless people, she knew, often stirred up trouble. Mrs. Bantry, her friend, leaned close. Jane, this is dragging on. Craddock's thorough, but I'm getting the creeps. Where's Charles gone? Outside, I think, Miss Marple said softly. He's not one for sitting still. She thought of a St. Mary Mead boy who ran off during a church meeting, only to be caught stealing apples. Charles, with his cocky grin and sharp eyes, reminded her of him. Mrs. Harcourt stood by the fireplace, her green dress stiff, her face hard. She'd barely spoken since showing Craddock the safe, but her hands gripped her handkerchief tight. Miss Marple watched her, thinking of the hidden fortune Mrs. Clement mentioned, a treasure tied to the sapphire. Did Mrs. Harcourt know where it was, or was she afraid someone else did? The young policeman by the door shifted, his boots creaking. Tommy, the grocer's boy, whispered to his friend. Bet Charles took the gem and ran. He's shifty. Miss Marple heard, her lips twitching. Village boys loved drama, but they weren't always wrong. A scream cut through the room, sharp and high. Everyone froze. It came from outside, near the garden. Lydia gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Mrs. Harcourt's head snapped up. Mr. Travers dropped a teacup, the china shattering on the floor. Miss Marple's heart quickened, but she stayed calm, her mind already working. The policeman ran to the door, flinging it open. Cold air rushed in, carrying the smell of wet earth. Stay here, he barked, dashing out. Craddock appeared from the study, his face grim, and followed. The villagers crowded near the windows, peering into the dark. "What was that?" Mrs. Bantry whispered, clutching Miss Marple's arm. "Jane, something's wrong, very wrong," Miss Marple said, her voice low. She stood, moving to the window. The garden was shadowy, lit only by the manor's lights. She saw the policeman's torch bobbing, then heard a shout. Her stomach tightened. She thought of a St. Mary Mead picnic where a scream led to a nasty fall, but this felt darker. Minutes later, Craddock came back, his face pale, rain dripping from his hat. "Everyone, stay calm," he said, his voice tight. "We've found Charles. He's dead in the rose garden." Gasps filled the room. Mrs. Harcourt swayed, grabbing the fireplace for support. "Dead," she whispered. "My nephew." Her voice cracked, but Miss Marple caught a flicker in her eye shock. "Yes, but something else." "Fear," Lydia let out, a small cry, covering her face. Dr. Pennington stood rigid, his hand on his bag. Mr. Travers bent to pick up the broken cup, his face blank, but his hands shook slightly. Miss Marple watched them all, her mind like a net, catching every reaction. "How?" Mr. Pye squeaked, his handkerchief flapping. "Was it an accident?" Craddock shook his head. "Not likely. Looks like poison. There's a teacup near him, untouched. We'll need a doctor to confirm, but he's gone." He looked at Mrs. Harcourt. "I'm sorry, ma'am." Mrs. Harcourt sank into a chair, her face white. "Poison," she murmured, "in my garden." Her hands twisted the handkerchief, tearing it. Miss Marple's eyes narrowed. Poison was personal. She knew. It took planning, not anger. She thought of a St. Mary Mead woman who poisoned her husband's tea over a small betrayal. A teacup, untouched. That was odd. She glanced at the tea table, where Mr. Travers was clearing cups. Had one gone missing? Craddock turned to the crowd. "No one leaves this room until I say. This is a murder now, not just a theft. I'll need statements from everyone." He nodded to the policeman, who stood by the door, looking nervous. The villagers whispered, their voices panicked. Tommy's friend nudged him. "Told you Charles was trouble. Bet he stole the gem, and someone got mad." Tommy nodded, wide-eyed. Mrs. Bantry gripped Miss Marple's arm. "Jane, this is awful. Charles, murdered. Who'd do that?" "Someone with a reason," Miss Marple said softly, "and reasons hide in plain sight." She thought of the sapphire, the fortune, the curse Mrs. Clement mentioned. Was Charles killed for what he knew, or what he took? Craddock called Mrs. Harcourt to the study again, leaving the policeman in charge. The room buzzed louder. Lydia sat, her hands shaking, staring at the floor. Miss Marple moved closer, her steps quiet. "Miss Gray," she said gently, "you must be shocked. Charles was unkind to you." Lydia looked up, her eyes wet. "He was cruel," she whispered, "always accusing me. But I didn't. I wouldn't." Her voice broke, and she looked away. Miss Marple patted her hand. "Of course, dear." But she noticed Lydia's ring twisted, so hard it left a red mark. Guilt or fear. She thought of a St. Mary Mead girl who cried after a theft, not because she stole, but because she saw something. Did Lydia see something tonight? She moved to Dr. Pennington, who was by the bookshelf, his face grim. "A sad night," she said, her voice mild. "You knew Charles, sir." He shook his head, too fast. "Barely. Met him tonight." His fingers tapped his bag, and Miss Marple noticed a bulge still there, heavy. "Poison's a nasty way too. Go," he added, his voice low. "It is," Miss Marple said. Clever, though quiet. She watched his face, but he turned away, grabbing a book. She thought of his quick denial about India, his notebook. Was he hiding a motive? Mr. Travers passed by, his tray empty. Miss Marple smiled. "Mr. Travers, you've a hard job tonight. Did you see Charles leave?" He paused, his eyes flat. "No, ma'am, I was serving tea." His voice was steady, but Miss Marple saw his scar, again that faint mark on his knuckle, and the mud. She thought of a St. Mary Mead man caught lying, because of dirt from a place he shouldn't have been. "Thank you," she said, letting him go. She sat near Mrs. Bantry, her mind buzzing. Charles, dead by poison. A teacup, untouched. Mud, A scar, a bag, a ring, small clues, but they'd fit together. They always did. Mrs. Bantry, whispered Jane, this is like a nightmare. First a theft, now a murder. Is it the sapphire? Maybe, Miss Marple said. Or maybe the sapphires. A trick. She thought of a St. Mary Mead case, where a stolen watch hid a bigger crime. Was the gem a distraction? She glanced at Mrs. Harcourt, back now, her face like a mask. Did she know more than she said? Craddock called Lydia next, and she went, her steps slow. The villagers talked louder. Mrs. Clement clutched her handbag. It's the curse, she whispered to Mr. Pye. The sapphire's cursed, I tell you. Mr. Pye scoffed. Nonsense. It's greed. Charles probably took it, and someone wanted it back. He mopped his forehead, his hands shaky. Miss Marple listened, her mind ticking. Greed, yes, but also fear. She thought of the fortune, the hidden gold Mrs. Clement mentioned. Charles was poking around as a boy, looking for it. Did he find something? Or did someone think he did? Lydia returned, her face paler. Craddock called. Dr. Pennington, again. Miss Marple watched him go, his bag slung over his shoulder. She thought of his sunburn, his quick answers. Was he after the sapphire, or the fortune? The clock struck 10, its chime heavy. The rain had stopped, but the air felt damp. Mrs. Bantry shivered. Jane, I'm scared. A murderer's here, with us. Not just a murderer, Miss Marple said softly. A planner. She thought of the poison, the teacup, the timing. Someone was clever, but clever people made mistakes. She'd find them, she knew, like she found a St. Mary Mead thief by a dropped button. Craddock came back, his face tired. We'll search the garden at dawn, he said. For now, no one leaves. Get some rest if you can. He posted the policeman at the door, his eyes on the crowd. Miss Marple settled back, her kind face hiding a mind like a steel trap. Charles was dead, the sapphire gone, and the truth was close. In St. Mary Mead, lies never lasted long. Chapter 5. The cryptic letter. The drawing room at Willow Manor was dim, the fire low, and the air heavy with fear. Miss Jane Marple sat quietly, her hands folded, her eyes sharp behind her gentle smile. Charles's murder in the garden had shaken everyone, and the stolen Harcourt sapphire now felt like a shadow over the house. Inspector Craddock was outside with the policeman, checking the rose garden where Charles's body lay. The villagers whispered, their voices nervous, like mice, skittering in the dark dot. Miss Marple watched the suspects. Lydia Gray, the governess, sat with her head down, her fingers still twisting her ring. Dr. Pennington, the archaeologist, stood by a window, his tweed jacket crumpled, his heavy bag at his feet. Mr. Travers, the butler, moved silently, clearing cups, his face blank but his muddy shoes still catching Miss Marple's eye. Mrs. Harcourt sat stiffly, her green dress creased, her hands clutching her torn handkerchief. The room felt like a pot about to boil over. Mrs. Bantry, Miss Marple's friend, leaned close. Jane, this is dreadful. A murder. And that sapphire, still missing. It's like a bad dream. Not a dream, Miss Marple said softly, but a puzzle. She thought of a St. Mary Mead case, where a stolen necklace hid a darker secret. Charles's death, she felt, was no accident. It was part of something bigger. A knock at the door made everyone jump. The young policeman stepped in, holding a damp envelope. Miss Marple, he said, this was left at the gate. It's for you. The room went quiet. Miss Marple took the envelope, her fingers steady. It was plain, with her name scrawled, in black ink. No stamp, no address. She opened it carefully, aware of every eye on her. Inside was a single sheet. The words typed, the sapphire's theft is a lie. It's a cover for murder. Look to the shadow from the east. Miss Marple's lips pursed. A cryptic note, she thought, like something from a St. Mary Mead mystery, where an anonymous tip led to a thief. She folded the letter and slipped it into her pocket, her face calm but her mind racing. A cover for murder. And what was this shadow? From the east. Who sent that? Mrs. Harcourt snapped, her voice sharp. What does it say? Nothing to worry about, Miss Marple said, her tone mild. Just a note from a friend. She didn't trust Mrs. Harcourt's quick anger. nor the way Lydia's head snapped up at the word letter. Dr. Pennington's hand paused on his bag, and Mr. Travers's eyes flicked to her pocket. They're all curious, she thought. Or scared. Craddock returned, his coat wet from the garden. We've secured the scene, he said. Charles was poisoned, likely in that teacup. No prints, though it's clean. We'll know more tomorrow. He looked at Miss Marple, noticing the envelope's edge in her pocket. What's that, Miss Marple? A small thing, she said, smiling. I'll show you later. She wanted time to think. The letter's words, shadow from the east, nagged at her. East meant Egypt, maybe, where Dr. Pennington traveled. Or was it India, tied to the sapphire's curse? The clock struck 11. Its chime heavy. Craddock sighed. It's late. We'll stay here tonight. Rooms are upstairs. No one leaves. The villagers groaned, but Miss Marple nodded. A locked house meant the truth was close. She stood, her small frame unnoticed, and slipped out to the hall. She needed answers, and St. Mary Mead's library was the place to start. It wasn't far, and Craddock was busy. Dolly, she whispered to Mrs. Bantry, I'm going for a walk. Tell no one. Mrs. Bantry's eyes widened. Jane, it's pouring, and a murderer's out there. I'll be quick, Miss Marple said, her voice firm. She grabbed her coat and slipped out the back door, her umbrella shielding her from the drizzle. The village was dark, the streets empty. She thought of a St. Mary Mead night when she followed a hunch and found a stolen watch. Hunches, she knew, were just logic in disguise. The library was a small stone building, its windows dark. Miss Marple had a key. Her friend, Mrs. Price, the postmistress, trusted her with it. Inside, the air smelled of old books and dust. She lit a lamp and headed to the history section, her fingers trailing over spines. She wanted to know about the sapphire, the Harcourts, and this shadow from the east. She found a book on local families, its pages yellowed. The Harcourt section was short but juicy. Evelyn's husband, George Harcourt, was a collector of rare gems, including the sapphire, bought from an Indian trader in 1890. Rumors said it was stolen from a temple, cursed to bring ruin. George died young, leaving Evelyn alone. He'd also hidden a fortune gold, some said locked away in Willow Manor. Miss Marple's eyes narrowed. The sapphire as a key, she thought, just like Mrs. Clement's gossip. Next, she pulled a book on gems. The Harcourt sapphire was listed, a deep blue stone, flawless, tied to an Indian legend about a goddess's wrath. Miss Marple thought of Dr. Pennington's travels. Egypt, he said, but his quick denial about India stuck with her. Was he lying? She found a thin book on Egyptian artifacts. Skimming it, one page mentioned a shadow curse, a myth about treasures taken from tombs. It wasn't India, but it was east, close enough. Her lamp flickered, and she glanced at the clock. Midnight. Time to go. She tucked the books back, her mind buzzing. The letter's words, theft a lie, murdered the go fit with her hunch. Charles's death wasn't about the sapphire alone. Someone wanted him gone, maybe because he knew about the fortune. Back at Willow Manor, the house was quiet, the villagers asleep or pretending to be. Miss Marple slipped in, her coat damp. Mrs. Bantry was waiting in the hall, her face pale. Jane, you're mad, wandering alone. What did you find? Bits and pieces, Miss Marple said, her voice low. The sapphire's more than a gem, Dolly. It's a key to something bigger. She thought of the fortune, the curse, the letter. She needed to watch Dr. Pennington close his bag, his lies about India, his interest in treasures. Upstairs, Craddock had assigned rooms. Miss Marple shared with Mrs. Bantry, a small space with creaky beds. As they settled in, Miss Marple pulled out the letter, reading it again by candlelight. Shadow from the east, she murmured. It's a clue, but to what? Mrs. Bantry yawned. You're too clever, Jane, but be careful. A killer's here, I know, Miss Marple said, her eyes on the letter. She thought of Lydia's fear, Dr. Pennington's bag, Mr. Travers's mud, Mrs. Harcourt's anger. Each was a thread in a tangled web. She remembered a St. Mary Mead letter that warned of a theft, only to hide a betrayal. Was this letter a warning or a trick? She blew out the candle, the room dark. Sleep wouldn't come easy, not with a murderer so close. The sapphire was gone, Charles was dead, and the letter pointed to a deeper plot. Miss Marple's mind worked like a loom, weaving clues. The truth, she knew, was in the little things: mud, a ring, a lie. In St. Mary Mead, secrets always unraveled, and she'd be there when they did. Chapter 6. Tea and Suspicions. The morning sun peeked through St. Mary Mead's misty hills, but Willow Manor still felt heavy with secrets. Miss Jane Marple sat in her borrowed room, her blue coat neatly folded, her mind buzzing like a beehive. Charles's murder and the stolen Harcourt sapphire hung over the house. And that cryptic letter, the sapphire's theft is a lie, a cover for murder, nagged at her. She'd slipped back from the library last night, her head full of clues about curses and hidden fortunes, but she needed more. People she knew spilled truths when they thought no one was listening. Inspector Craddock had let the villagers go home at dawn after taking their statements. But he'd asked the main suspects, Mrs. Harcourt, Lydia Gray, Dr. Pennington, and Mr. Travers, to stay close. The garden was roped off, where Charles's body had been found, poisoned by a teacup. Miss Marple thought of the mud on Mr. Travers' shoe, Lydia's nervous ring-twisting, and Dr. Pennington's heavy bag. Each was a piece of the puzzle, and today she'd find more. Mrs. Bantry, her friend, bustled in, her face bright despite the grim night. "Jane, I'm hosting tea this afternoon at Gussington Hall. Everyone's coming, villagers, suspects, even Craddock. You'll be there, won't you? It'll cheer us up." Miss Marple smiled, her eyes twinkling. "I wouldn't miss it, Dolly." Tea loosens tongues. She thought of a St. Mary Mead tea party where a careless word solved a theft. Gossip, she knew, was better than any detective's notebook. By 3 o'clock, Gussington Hall's garden was lively, with tables set under blooming roses. The air smelled of fresh scones and warm tea. Villagers chatted, their voices lighter now, away from Willow Manor's gloom. Miss Marple sat near a hedge, her small frame blending in, her ears sharp. She wore her best hat, a soft gray one, but her mind was on the case. Mrs. Harcourt arrived, her green dress swapped for a stern black one, her face tight. Lydia followed, in a plain blue dress, her eyes darting like a deer's. Dr. Pennington came next, his tweed jacket dusty, his bag slung over his shoulder. Mr. Travers was there too, serving tea for Mrs. Bantry, his butler's mask firmly in place. Miss Marple noticed his shoes clean now, no mud. Had he scrubbed them? And why? Craddock stood by the gate, watching everyone, his notebook out. Tommy, the grocer's boy, ran around, sneaking biscuits, his friend trailing him. Mrs. Clement, the vicar's wife, sat nearby, whispering about the sapphire's curse. Miss Marple sipped her tea, letting the chatter wash over her. People, she thought, were like books, open them right, and they'd tell their story. She started with Mrs. Clement, sliding into the chair beside her. "Such a lovely day," Miss Marple said, her voice warm, but sad, "after poor Charles. Did you know him well?" Mrs. Clement shook her head, her eyes wide. "Not really, Miss Marple. He was a wild boy, always in trouble. Came back to Willow Manor a month ago, poking around. Some say he was after that hidden fortune." Miss Marple nodded, her mind clicking. Charles and the fortune again. "A fortune's a heavy thing," she said. "Anyone else looking for it?" Mrs. Clement leaned close, her voice low. "I saw a stranger last week, near Willow Manor's gate. Tall, with a dark coat. Not from here. Maybe he was after it too." Miss Marple's eyebrows lifted. A stranger. That was new. She thought of a St. Mary Mead man seen lurking before a robbery. "Interesting," she said. "Thank you, dear." She filed the stranger away, like a stitch in her knitting. Next, she moved near Lydia, who was pouring tea, her hands shaky. "You're kind to help, Miss Gray," Miss Marple said, smiling. "It must be hard, with all this talk of murder." Lydia's cup rattled. "It's awful," she said, her voice soft. "Charles, he wasn't nice, but I didn't want him dead." Her eyes flicked to Mrs. Harcourt, then away. Miss Marple watched her hesitation. She thought, like a St. Mary Mead girl who hid her sweetheart's trouble. You've been at Willow Manor a while, she said. Known the family long. Lydia froze, then shook her head. Just a year. I'd teach the children. Her voice was quick, too quick. Miss Marple smiled, patting her arm. Of course, but she noted Lydia's blush, her fast answer. A secret, maybe, about her past. She drifted toward Dr. Pennington, who was eating a scone, his bag at his feet. Dr. Pennington, she said, her tone curious, your work sounds exciting. Ever find treasures, like the sapphire? He coughed, crumbs falling. Not my field, he said, his sunburned face tight. I dig up old pots, not gems. His hand rested on his bag, protective. Miss Marple thought of his lie about India, his notebook. Egypt must be thrilling, she said. All those tombs and curses. His eyes narrowed, just a flicker. Curses are nonsense, he said, standing. Excuse me. He moved off, his bag swinging. Miss Marple's lips twitched. Touchy, she thought, like a St. Mary Mead man caught, fibbing about his debts. Mr. Travers passed, carrying a teapot. Miss Marple caught his eye. Mr. Travers, you're a marvel, helping here, she said. Egypt's in the news lately, those digs. Ever been? He paused, his face blank. No, ma'am, never left England. His voice was flat, but Miss Marple saw his hand tighten on the pot. She thought of the letter's shadow from the east, the mud on his shoe. Fancy that, she said, letting him go. A lie, or just nerves. She sat near Mrs. Bantry, who was chatting with Mr. Pye. Jane, any luck? Mrs. Bantry whispered, passing a scone. Bits and pieces, Miss Marple said, her voice low. A stranger was seen near Willow Manor, and Lydia's hiding something. So's Dr. Pennington. She thought of Mr. Travers' clean shoes, his quick denial. The letter's words murder, not theft echoed in her mind. Mrs. Harcourt was talking to Craddock, now, her voice sharp. Inspector, you must find that sapphire. It's my family's legacy. Her hand shook, and Miss Marple wondered grief for Charles, or fear for herself. Tommy ran by, his friend giggling. Heard the stranger had a scar, Tommy said, loud enough for Miss Marple to catch. Like a pirate. She smiled, but her mind grabbed the detail. A scar, like the one on Mr. Travers' knuckle. Or someone new. The tea party wound down, the sun dipping low. Craddock gathered the suspects. I'll need you all at Willow Manor tomorrow, he said. We're searching the house again. Lydia nodded, pale. Dr. Pennington frowned, his bag close. Mr. Travers bowed, silent. Mrs. Harcourt's face was hard, like stone. Miss Marple walked home with Mrs. Bantry. The village quiet under the evening sky. Jane, you're up to something, Mrs. Bantry said. That letter, what did it say? Just a hint, Miss Marple said, her eyes on the road. But it's enough. She thought of the stranger, Lydia's blush, Dr. Pennington's bag, Mr. Travers' denial. The sapphire was a trick, she felt, hiding Charles's murder. And that fortune, it pulled them all, like moths to a flame. At home, she sat by her fire, knitting a pink scarf, her needles clicking. The letter lay on her table, its words clear. Shadow from the east. Egypt, India, a stranger, a scarcluse, small but growing. She thought of a St. Mary Mead tea, where a careless word cracked a case. Today's tea had given her threads, and she'd weave them tight. The clock struck 7, its chime soft. Miss Marple's kind face hit a mind like a trap. Charles was dead, the sapphire gone, and the killer was close. In St. Mary Mead, truths hid in whispers, and she'd hear them soon. Chapter 7. The Hidden Passage. The morning air in St. Mary Mead was crisp, with a hint of autumn chill. Miss Jane Marple stood at her cottage gate, her gray hat snug, her eyes bright despite the weight of the mystery at Willow Manor. Charles's murder, the stolen Harcourt sapphire, and that cryptic letter, the sapphire's theft, is a lie, a cover for murder, kept her mind spinning. Yesterday's tea party had given her clues. A stranger near the manor, Lydia's quick blush, Dr. Pennington's touchy denial, Mr. Travers' clean shoes. Today, she needed more, and Willow Manor itself might hold the key. Her nephew, Raymond West, arrived from London, his car rattling up the lane. He was a writer, full of big ideas, but he loved his aunt's sharp mind. "Aunt Jane," he said, grinning. "Mrs. Bantry says you're knee-deep in a murder. Need a sidekick?" Miss Marple smiled, her voice soft. "A helper, perhaps." Willow Manor's old Raymond. Old houses hide things. She thought of a St. Mary Mead cottage where a loose floorboard revealed stolen coins. Buildings, she knew, were like people full of secrets. They walked to Willow Manor, the village quiet under gray clouds. Inspector Craddock was there, directing policemen to search the garden again for clues to Charles's poisoning. Mrs. Harcourt, Lydia Gray, Dr. Pennington, and Mr. Travers were inside, under watch. Miss Marple had asked Craddock's permission to look around, saying she wanted to stretch her legs. He'd agreed, used to her quiet ways. The manor's stone walls loomed, ivy clinging like a shroud. Inside, the air smelled of wax and dust. Mrs. Harcourt sat in the drawing room, her black dress stiff, her face pale. Lydia was by a window, reading a book, but her eyes flicked up nervously. Dr. Pennington paced his heavy bag on a chair. Mr. Travers served coffee, his face blank, but Miss Marple noticed his scarf faint, but there, like a whisper of his past. "Raymond, dear," Miss Marple said, her voice low. "Let's see the library. Books tell stories, even if they're not. Read." She thought of her library trip, the Sapphire's curse, the hidden fortune. The manor's library might hold more. The library was a long room, its shelves packed with leather books. A big desk sat under a window, and a portrait of George Harcourt, Evelyn's husband, hung above the fireplace. His stern face seemed to watch them. Raymond whistled. "Creepy place, Aunt Jane. What are we looking for?" "Anything odd," Miss Marple said, her eyes scanning. She thought of a St. Mary Mead house where a hidden drawer held a will. Old homes loved tricks. She moved to the desk, her fingers brushing its edge. The wood was smooth, but one panel felt loose, like it could slide. "Raymond, help here," she said. He knelt, his hands quick. The panel clicked and slid open, revealing a small hollow. Inside was Dustin, a scrap of paper, yellowed with age. Miss Marple picked it up, her heart quickening. It was a sketch, rough but clear, a floor plan of Willow Manor, with an X marked behind a bookshelf. "A map," Raymond whispered, his eyes wide. "Aunt Jane, this is treasure hunt stuff." "Perhaps," Miss Marple said, folding the paper. She thought of the fortune, the sapphire, as its key. Was this George's doing? She moved to the bookshelf, her small frame dwarfed by its height. "Push here, Raymond," he shoved, and the shelf creaked, swinging inward like a door. A narrow passage opened, dark and musty, its walls stone. Raymond gasped. "A secret passage. Aunt Jane, you're a genius." "Hush," Miss Marple said, her voice calm but her mind racing. She thought of a St. Mary Mead barn with a hidden loft, used by a smuggler. Passages meant secrets. She stepped inside, her shoes soft on the floor. Raymond followed, his torch flicking on. The passage was tight, sloping down, then leveling out. Cobwebs brushed Miss Marple's hat, but she didn't flinch. The air smelled of earth, like a grave. At the end was a small alcove, barely big enough for two. On the floor lay a velvet pouch, empty, and a single blue bead, glinting in the torchlight. Miss Marple knelt, her fingers careful. The bead was sapphire blue, like the stolen gem. "Not the sapphire," she murmured, "but part of it, maybe." She thought of a St. Mary Mead necklace, broken to hide a theft. Was the sapphire taken here? Then moved. "Look, Aunt Jane." Raymond pointed to the wall. Scratched in the stone were initials, G.H. George Harcourt, and below, a date, 1895. Miss Marple's eyes narrowed. George, hiding something, the fortune, or just the sapphire. She picked up the pouch, noting its frayed edge. A thread stuck out green, like Mrs. Harcourt's dress. Odd, she thought. Mrs. Harcourt claimed the sapphire was in the safe, not here, and the bead. It suggested someone used this passage recently. She thought of Mr. Travers' mud, Dr. Pennington's bag, Lydia's nerves. Who knew this place? We should tell Craddock, Raymond said, his voice eager. Not yet, Miss Marple said. Let's keep this quiet. She thought of the letter. Theft, a lie. Murder, the goal. The Sapphire's theft felt staged, like a St. Mary Mead play, where a fake robbery hid a real crime. This passage proved if someone moved a gem. Maybe to frame Lydia, or distract from Charles's death. They slipped back to the library, closing the shelf. Miss Marple tucked the pouch and bead in her pocket, her mind buzzing. She glanced at George's portrait, his eyes cold. You left a mess, sir, she whispered, thinking of the fortune, the curse, Charles's poison. Back in the drawing room, the suspects hadn't moved. Mrs. Harcourt was arguing with Craddock, her voice sharp. Inspector, my nephew's dead. My Sapphire's gonna do something. Lydia looked up, her book forgotten, her face pale. Dr. Pennington stopped pacing, his hand on his bag. Mr. Travers poured coffee, but Miss Marple caught his glance at the library door. Did he know the passage? Raymond nudged her. Aunt Jane, what now? Watch, dear, she said, sitting near Mrs. Bantry, who'd arrived with scones. People show their hands when they're nervous. She thought of a St. Mary Mead card game, where a fidgety player gave away his bluff. Mrs. Bantry leaned close. Jane, you look pleased. Found something. Just ideas, Miss Marple said, her eyes on the suspects. She noticed Lydia's ring, twisted red marks on her finger. Dr. Pennington's bag was open slightly, a glint of metal inside, a tool, or something worse. And Mr. Travers' scarret caught the light as he turned, like a warning. Craddock called Dr. Pennington to the study, leaving the policeman at the door. Miss Marple sipped her coffee, listening to Mrs. Harcourt's complaints. My family's ruined, she said, her voice bitter. That sapphire was our pride. Pride falls hard, Miss Marple said softly, thinking of the passage, the bead, the green thread. Was Mrs. Harcourt part of this, or just a pawn? She thought of a St. Mary Mead widow who lied to save her name. Lydia stood, moving to the window, a book left behind. Miss Marple followed, her voice kind. Miss Gray, you're pale. Worried about the children. Lydia jumped, then nodded. There, with their aunt. I just want this over. Her eyes flicked to the library, then away. Miss Marple's heart quickened. Did Lydia know the passage, or was she just scared? Things clear up, Miss Marple said, patting her arm. She thought of the letter's shadow from the east, Dr. Pennington's Egypt, Mr. Travers' denial. The passage was a clue, but to what murder, theft, or both? The clock struck noon, its chime loud. Mrs. Bantry sighed. Jane, this house is cursed. First Charles, now all this tension. Not cursed, Miss Marple said, her eyes on the suspects, just human. She thought of the pouch, the bead, the initials. Someone used that passage to hide the sapphire, to kill Charles. She'd find them, she knew, like a St. Mary Mead thief, caught by a stray thread. Craddock returned, his face tired. We'll search the house again tomorrow, he said. Stay close, all of you. Miss Marple nodded, her kind face hiding a mind like a net. The passage was her secret for now, but it pointed to the truth. In St. Mary Mead, walls talked, and she was listening. Chapter 8. A second death. The afternoon sun cast long shadows over Willow Manor, but the house felt darker than ever. Miss Jane Marple sat in the drawing room, her hands folded, her sharp eyes hidden behind a gentle smile. The hidden passage she and Raymond found in the library of velvet pouch, a blue bead, a green thread, pointed to a staged sapphire theft, just as the cryptic letter warned. The theft is a lie, a cover for murder. Charles's poisoning in the garden was bad enough, but Miss Marple felt a bigger trap closing in. Inspector Craddock was upstairs, organizing a house search with his policemen. Mrs. Harcourt, Lydia Gray, Dr. Pennington, and Mr. Travers were under watch, their faces tense. Lydia sat by a window, her ring twisted tight, her eyes red. Mrs. Harcourt stood stiff in her black dress, a torn handkerchief in hand. Mr. Travers served tea, his scar glinting, his shoes too clean now. Dr. Pennington was missing. He'd gone to his room, saying he felt ill. Miss Marple didn't like that. Quiet people, she knew, could be dangerous. Mrs. Bantry, her friend, whispered, "Jane, this place is a nightmare. Charles dead. The sapphire gone. What's next?" "Trouble," Miss Marple said softly, thinking of a St. Mary Mead theft that turned deadly when cornered. Her mind held clues. The passage, the letters, shadow from the east, Mr. Travers, mud, Dr. Pennington's bag, Lydia's blush. Something was coming. She felt like a storm. A shout from upstairs broke the silence. Craddock's voice, sharp and urgent. Everyone froze. Lydia gasped. Mrs. Harcourt's head snapped up, and Mr. Travers' teapot wobbled. Miss Marple's heart quickened, but she stayed calm, her mind already sorting possibilities. Heavy boots thumped down the stairs. Craddock burst in, his face grim, a policeman behind him. "Stay where you are," he said, his voice hard. "Dr. Pennington's dead. Found him in his room." The room erupted in gasps. Mrs. Harcourt clutched her chest. "Dead," she whispered. Lydia's hands flew to her mouth, her ring glinting. Mr. Travers set the teapot down, his face blank but his eyes sharp. Miss Marple watched them all, her mind like a net, catching every flinch. "How?" Mrs. Bantry asked, her voice shaky. "Another murder." Craddock held up a paper, his jaw tight. "Looks like suicide. He left a note, confessing to stealing the sapphire. Says he couldn't live with the guilt." He glanced at Miss Marple, his eyes narrow. "But I'm not sure I buy it." Miss Marple's lips pursed. Suicide. Too tidy, she thought, like a St. Mary Mead, death blamed on despair, but hiding poison. "May I see the note, Inspector?" she asked, her voice mild. Craddock hesitated, then handed it over. The paper was plain, the words typed. "I took the sapphire. I killed Charles to cover it. I'm sorry." No signature, but a smudge of ink marked the corner. Miss Marple studied it, thinking of Dr. Pennington's notebook, his neat handwriting. This wasn't his sheet. Seen his notes at the tea party, small and slanted, and typed odd for a suicide. She handed it back, her face calm but her mind racing. "Interesting," she said, thinking of the passage, the bead, the letter. Dr. Pennington's death felt staged, like the sapphire's theft. Someone was pulling strings, she knew, like a St. Mary Mead puppeteer hiding a crime. Craddock turned to the policeman. "Get the doctor here. Seal Pennington's room." He looked at the suspects. "No one leaves until we sort this out. To deaths now, and I want answers." Mrs. Harcourt sank into a chair, her face white. "First Charles, now this. My house is cursed." Her voice shook, but Miss Marple caught her glance at Mr. Travers quick, like a spark. Was she scared? Or hiding something? Lydia stood, her voice trembling. Dr. Pennington didn't seem like that. He was quiet, but not guilty. Her eyes flicked to the floor, avoiding Craddock's stare. Miss Marple noted her words, her hesitation. Did Lydia know him better than she said? Mr. Travers spoke, his voice flat. "I brought him tea an hour ago. He seemed fine. His hands were steady, but Miss Marple saw his scar again, faint but clear. She thought of the stranger Tommy mentioned, with a scar. Was it Mr. Travers, lurking near the manor? Craddock nodded, his notebook out. "We'll check his room. Mrs. Harcourt, you first tell me about Pennington." She followed him to the study, her steps slow. The policeman stayed, watching the others. Miss Marple sat near Mrs. Bantry, her mind buzzing. "Jane," Mrs. Bantry whispered, "suicide, or another murder." "Murder," Miss Marple said softly, dressed up as shame. She thought of a St. Mary Mead man, found dead with a fake note, hiding a killer's hand. The typed note, the smudge, it didn't fit Dr. Pennington's careful ways, and his bag. She needed to see it. She moved to Lydia, her voice kind. "Miss Gray, you knew Dr. Pennington a little, didn't you? He seemed fond of books." Lydia's eyes widened, then dropped. "We talked sometimes," she said, her voice quick, "about history, not crimes." Her ring twisting left, red marks, and Miss Marple thought of a St. Mary Mead girl who lied to protect a friend. Was Lydia shielding someone? "Thank you, dear," Miss Marple said, moving on. She stopped near Mr. Travers, who was clearing cups. "Mr. Travers, you saw Dr. Pennington last. Was his door locked?" He paused, his eyes flat. "No, ma'am, open." His voice was steady, but Miss Marple noticed his hand brushed his pocket bulky, like it held something small. A key. She thought of the passage, the green thread. Did he know it? Craddock returned, calling Lydia next. Miss Marple sat, watching. Mr. Travers moved to the hall. She followed quietly, her steps soft. He stopped by a mirror, adjusting his tie, but his eyes flicked to her. "Need something, ma'am?" he asked, his voice cool. "Just air," Miss Marple said, smiling. She thought of his clean shoes, his scar, the stranger. Was he the shadow from the east? She let him go, her mind holding the moment like a snapshot. Back in the drawing room, Mrs. Bantry was pale. "Jane, this is too much. 2 deaths, and that note." "A lie," Miss Marple said, her voice low. "Someone's clever, Dolly, but not clever enough." She thought of the letter, the passage, the bead. Dr. Pennington's death was a move in a game. She felt like a St. Mary Mead chess match where a pawn hit a queen's plan. Lydia came back, her face paler. Craddock called Mr. Travers. Miss Marple watched him go, noting his stiff walk. She thought of his tea tray, the cup he gave Dr. Pennington. Poison again, or something else. The clock struck 4, its chime heavy. Villagers outside whispered, peering at the manor. Tommy ran by, shouting, "Another death." "It's the curse." Miss Marple smiled faintly. Boys loved stories, but she wanted facts. She moved to Dr. Pennington's bag, left by his chair. Craddock's policeman was distracted, talking to Mrs. Bantry. Miss Marple nudged the bag open, her fingers quick. Inside, she saw a notebook, a small trowel, and a glint of blue bead, like the one in the passage. Her heart quickened. Proof, she thought, of his link to the sapphire. But killed for it. She closed the bag, sitting back as the policeman turned. Her mind raced. The note was fake. The bead tied Pennington to the passage, and the letter pointed to murder. Someone wanted Charles and Pennington. Gone. Why? The fortune, she thought, or a secret they knew. Craddock returned, his face tired. "The doctors. Coming. Pennington's room. Had pills, maybe poison. We'll know soon." He looked at Miss Marple. "That note." Miss Marple. "Thoughts." "Later," she said, her voice mild. She wanted to check Pennington's notebook, compare it to the note. She thought of the green thread, Mr. Travers' pocket, Lydia's lies. A mastermind was at work. She knew, like a St. Mary Mead schemer, caught by a stray word. Mrs. Bantry shivered. "Jane, I'm scared. A killer's playing games." "And losing," Miss Marple said, her eyes on the room. The truth was close, hidden in beads, notes, and scars. In St. Mary Mead, lies fell apart, and she'd see this one crumble. Chapter 9. The trap is set. The sun shone bright over St. Mary Mead, but Willow Manor's shadow hung heavy. Miss Jane Marple sat in her cottage, knitting a pink scarf, her mind weaving clues like threads. Charles's poisoning, Dr. Pennington's staged suicide, the missing Harcourt sapphire, and the cryptic letter. The theft is a lie, a cover for murder, pointed to a clever killer. The hidden passage, with its blue bead and green thread, proved the theft was a trick. Miss Marple felt the truth was close, but she needed to shake the killer loose. Yesterday's discoveries nagged at her. Mr. Travers' scar and clean shoes, Lydia's nervous ring-twisting, Mrs. Harcourt's quick glances, and the bead in Dr. Pennington's bag. The letter's shadow from the east hinted at a mastermind, and Miss Marple suspected someone was tying up loose ends. Charles and Pennington knew too much. Today, the village fete offered a chance to stir things up. She met Inspector Craddock at the village hall, where the fete was buzzing. Stalls sold cakes and jam, children ran with balloons, and a band played cheerful tunes. Craddock looked tired, his notebook full. "Miss Marple," he said, "we've got 2 deaths and no sapphire. Any ideas?" "A few," she said, her voice soft, her eyes sharp. "Inspector, let's try a trick. Spread word the sapphire's been found, hidden in the manor. The killer might panic." She thought of a St. Mary Mead trap, where a fake clue caught a thief. Killers, she knew, hated loose ends. Craddock raised an eyebrow but nodded. Worth a shot. I'll tell my men to whisper it around. We'll watch who bites. He moved off, speaking to a policeman, who started chatting with villagers. Miss Marple joined Mrs. Bantry at a tea stall, the air sweet, with scones. Jane, you're plotting, Mrs. Bantry said, passing a cup. What's this about the sapphire being found? A little bait, Miss Marple said, sipping her tea. People show their colors when they're scared. She thought of a St. Mary Mead gossip who spilled a secret when pushed. Her eyes scanned the fate, catching the suspects among the crowd. Mrs. Harcourt stood by a flower stall, her black dress stark against the bright blooms. Her face was tight, her hands twisting a new handkerchief. Lydia Gray was at a bookstall, flipping pages, but her eyes darted to the crowd. Mr. Travers helped at a cake stall, his butler's calm in place, but Miss Marple noticed his scar glint as he turned. The policeman's rumor was spreading mist. Marple heard whispers of sapphire, found ripple through the fate. She moved closer to Mrs. Harcourt, her voice kind. Lovely flowers. Mrs. Harcourt heard the news. They say the sapphire's back. Mrs. Harcourt's head snapped up, her eyes wide. Found where? Her voice was sharp, almost greedy. Miss Marple smiled, noting her grip on the handkerchief tight, like she was holding a secret. In the manor, they say, Miss Marple said, watching her face. Hidden well. Mrs. Harcourt's lips thinned, and she turned away, muttering about checking with Craddock. Miss Marple thought of a St. Mary Mead widow who panicked when her stolen goods were found. Was Mrs. Harcourt in on it? Next, Miss Marple drifted to Lydia, who was clutching a book, her ring red on her finger. Miss Gray, such a nice fate, Miss Marple said. They're saying the sapphires turned up. Good news, isn't it? Lydia's book fell, her face pale. Found, she stammered. Aye, that's good. Her eyes flicked to the manor, then away. She grabbed her bag, mumbling, I need to go, and hurried toward the gate. Miss Marple's heart quickened. Running, she thought, like a St. Mary Mead girl caught lying. She signaled Craddock, who was watching from a stall. He nodded, following Lydia at a distance. Miss Marple stayed put, her mind ticking. Lydia's panic meant something: guilt, fear, or a secret she couldn't keep. Mr. Travers was slicing cake, his knife steady. Miss Marple approached, smiling. Mr. Travers, you're a help here. Heard about the sapphire. They say it's back in the manor. His knife paused, just a second, his scar catching the light. Is that so, ma'am? His voice was flat, but his eyes flicked to the manor. Good news. He went back to cutting, but Miss Marple saw his jaw tighten. She thought of the passage, his clean shoes, the stranger with a scar. Was he the shadow? She sat with Mrs. Bantry, who was munching a scone. Jane, Lydia bolted like a rabbit. Think she's the killer? Maybe, Miss Marple said, her eyes on the crowd. Or a pawn. She thought of the letter, the bead, the green thread. Lydia's flight was a clue, but not the whole story. Someone was pulling strings. She felt like a St. Mary Mead schemer who used others to hide their crime. Craddock returned, his face grim. Lydia's gone to the manor. My man's tailing her. She's rattled. All right, what do you think, Miss Marple? She's scared, Miss Marple said, but not the mastermind. Watch Mr. Travers, Inspector, and Mrs. Harcourt. She thought of the passage, the note, Dr. Pennington's fake suicide. The killer was clever, but traps caught clever foxes. The fate carried on, but tension hummed beneath the laughter. Villagers whispered about the sapphire eyes on the suspects. Tommy, the grocer's boy, ran by, shouting, they found the gem. Bet it's cursed. Miss Marple smiled faintly. Boys loved drama, but they stirred it up. She moved to the cake stall, where Mr. Travers was packing up, leaving soon. Mr. Travers, she asked, her voice warm, the fates still lively. Duty calls, ma'am, he said, his eyes flat. She noticed his pockets still bulky, like it held a key. She thought of the passage, the green thread, like Mrs. Harcourt's dress, was Travers tied to her. Mrs. Harcourt was talking to Mr. Pye now, her voice low but sharp. "If the sapphire's found, I want it back," she said. Mr. Pye nodded, his handkerchief flapping. "Of course, Evelyn. But the deaths, it's bad business." Miss Marple heard, her mind catching his fear, her suspicion. Craddock's policeman signaled from the gate. Lydia was at the Manor's library. Craddock whispered to Miss Marple, "She's poking around the shelves. Think she knows something?" "Perhaps," Miss Marple said, thinking of the hidden passage. Lydia's flight was too quick, like a St. Mary Mead thief, caught by a rumor. But was she after the sapphire, or running from it? The sun dipped low, casting gold over the fate. Mrs. Bantry joined Miss Marple, her eyes wide. "Jane, Lydia's in trouble, isn't she? And Traversey's too calm." "Calm hides things," Miss Marple said, her voice soft. She thought of a St. Mary Mead man whose cool head hid a hot temper. The trap was working. Lydia ran. Travers tensed. Mrs. Harcourt snapped. The killer was nervous. She felt like a thread about to snap. Craddock gathered the suspects. "Back to the Manor," he said. "We're checking the library. Stay close." Mrs. Harcourt nodded, her face hard. Mr. Travers followed, his steps silent. Lydia was already there, Craddock said, and Miss Marple's mind raced. The passage, the bead, the note. Someone was watching, waiting. As they walked to the Manor, Miss Marple stayed near Mrs. Bantry, her eyes on the suspects. The fate's music faded, the village quiet. She thought of the letter's warning, the shadow from the east, the stranger with a scar. Lydia was a piece, but not the whole puzzle. The killer was close, she knew, and her trap would pull them out. The Manor loomed, its windows dark. Miss Marple's kind face hit a mind like a blade, cutting through lies. In St. Mary Mead, traps caught rats, and she'd catch this one soon. Chapter 10. The mind-blowing revelation. The evening sky over St. Mary Mead was deep purple, casting Willow Manor in a gloomy light. Miss Jane Marple stood in the drawing room, her small frame dwarfed by the tall windows, her eyes sharp behind her gentle smile. The trap she'd set with Inspector Craddock at the village, fate spreading word. The sapphire was found had worked. Lydia's flight to the Manor's library proved she knew something. But Miss Marple suspected a bigger hand at play. Charles's poisoning, Dr. Pennington's staged suicide, the missing Harcourt sapphire, and the cryptic letters, warning, the theft is a lie, a cover for murder, all pointed to a mastermind. Tonight, she'd unravel it. Craddock had gathered everyone, Mrs. Harcourt, Lydia Gray, Mr. Travers, and the villagers, including Mrs. Bantry and Tommy. The room buzzed with tension, the air thick like before a storm. Mrs. Harcourt sat stiff, her black dress creased, her hands tight. Lydia was pale, her ring twisted raw, her eyes on the floor. Mr. Travers stood by the tea table, his butler's mask perfect, but Miss Marple saw his scar glint. Craddock leaned by the door, his notebook ready, trusting Miss Marple's knack for truth. "Friends," Miss Marple began, her voice soft but clear, "this has been a sad time. A stolen sapphire, to death's Charles, and Dr. Pennington. But the truth is here, in this room." She thought of a St. Mary Mead meeting, where a quiet word cracked a theft. Silence, she knew, drew out guilt. Mrs. Harcourt snapped, "Get on with it, Miss Marple. Who took my sapphire? Who killed my nephew?" Miss Marple smiled, unfazed. The sapphire was a trick, Mrs. Harcourt, a shiny lure to hide murder. She pulled the cryptic letter from her pocket, holding it up. "This note warned me. The theft was a lie, meant to cover Charles's death, and Dr. Pennington's, another step in a clever plan." Lydia gasped, her hands shaking. Mr. Travers poured tea, his face blank. Miss Marple watched him, like a cat with a mouse. "Let's start with Charles," she said. "He came back to Willow Manor, hunting the fortune your husband, George, hid. He was nosy, wasn't he? Asking about the sapphire, poking in the library." Mrs. Harcourt nodded, her lips thin. "He was greedy, like always." "Greedy," Miss Marple said, "and dangerous. Someone feared he'd find the fortune or worse, knew where it was. So, they poisoned him in the garden, with a teacup." She thought of a St. Mary Mead poisoner, caught by a dropped vial. The sapphire's theft was staged to distract us. She turned to Lydia. Miss Gray, you were accused. Scared, you ran to the library yesterday when we said the sapphire was found. Why? Lydia's eyes filled. I heard Charles talk about a hidden passage. I thought the sapphire was there, that I could clear my name. Her voice broke, and Miss Marple patted her arm, thinking of a St. Mary Mead girl who hid a friend's trouble. You knew the passage, Miss Marple said, because someone told you. Someone who needed you to look guilty. She faced the room. I found that passage with my nephew Raymond. A blue bead, a velvet pouch, a green thread like your scarf, Mrs. Harcourt. But you weren't the thief. Mrs. Harcourt gasped. My scarf. I lost it weeks ago. Exactly, Miss Marple said. Someone took it to plant a clue. She looked at Mr. Travers, his hand still on the teapot. Mr. Travers, you served tea the night Charles died, and Dr. Pennington, before his suicide. You knew the passage, didn't you? Travers's eyes flicked up, cold. I'm a butler, miss. I serve, not scheme. His voice was flat, but Miss Marple saw his scar twitch, like a tail. She smiled. You're more, sir. I saw mud on your shoe that first night fresh, from the garden where Charles died. You cleaned it later, too careful. Your scar matched a stranger's seen near the manor, with a dark coat, and your pocket. It held a key, I bet, to the safe or passage. The room went quiet. Craddock stepped closer, his hand on his cuff. Travers stood still, his face a mask. Miss Marple went on, her voice like a needle. You stole the sapphire, Travers, but not for money. You used it to start chaos, to kill Charles. He knew your secret. What secret? Mrs. Bantry whispered, her eyes wide. Miss Marple faced Travers. Years ago, you worked for the Harcourts, didn't you? Before Charles was born. George wronged. You fired you maybe. Or worse, you came back, quiet, waiting. The fortune was your gold, hidden in the passage. Charles was close to it, so you poisoned him. Dr. Pennington, too, asking about treasures, digging into your past. Travers laughed, a hard sound. You're a mad old lady. No proof. Oh, proof, Miss Marple said, pulling the blue bead from her pocket. This was in the passage, and another in Dr. Pennington's bag. Your mistake, planting it to frame him. His suicide note, typed, not his writing. You used the passage to move the sapphire, frame Lydia, and kill those who threatened you. She thought of a St. Mary Mead liar caught by a stray button. Craddock spoke, his voice firm. Travers, we found a vial in your room, poison, hidden in a shoe, and a typewriter key, smudged with ink, like the note. Travers's mask cracked, his eyes blazing. You've got nothing, he shouted, but his hand went to his pocket. Craddock grabbed him, pulling out a small keyhole, like the safes. The room gasped, Lydia sobbing, Mrs. Harcourt staring. Miss Marple sighed. You manipulated Lydia, Travers, telling her about the passage, to make her look guilty. The green thread was a trick, stolen from Mrs. Harcourt's scarf. You planned it all, like a St. Mary Mead schemer, who used gossip to hide theft. Why? Mrs. Harcourt cried, her voice raw. Why my family? Miss Marple looked at Travers, his face twisted. Tell them, she said. Or shall I? He snarled, pulling free, but Craddock held tight. George ruined me. Travers spat. Cheated me out of my share gold from his deals. I came back to take it. Charles guessed, nosing around. Pennington, too, with his questions. I had to stop them. Miss Marple nodded, thinking of a St. Mary Mead grudge that turned deadly. You used the sapphire to start a panic, hid it in the passage, and killed to keep your secret. But little things, mud beads, a key gave you away. Craddock cuffed Travers, his voice grim. You're done, Travers. Let's go. The policeman led him out, the villagers whispering. Tommy's eyes wide. Lydia sank into a chair, crying, and Mrs. Harcourt stared, her face broken. Mrs. Bantry hugged Miss Marple. Jane, you're a marvel. How'd you know? People, Miss Marple said, her voice soft, leave traces. She thought of the letter, the passage, the scar. Travers was clever, but not clever enough. In St. Mary Mead, truth always won. The clock struck 7. Its chime clear. Miss Marple sat, her scarf in her lap, her mind quiet now. The sapphire was still hidden, but Craddock would find it. Travers was caught, the murders solved, and Willow Manor's secrets were bare. She smiled, thinking of a St. Mary Mead puzzle, finished by a single word. The truth, she knew, was always there, waiting for her to see it. Chapter 11. Justice and reflection. The morning sun spilled over St. Mary Mead, painting the village in soft gold. Willow Manor stood quiet now, its dark secrets laid bare. Miss Jane Marple sat in Mrs. Bantry's cozy parlor at Gossington Hall, sipping tea, her pink scarf half-knit in her lap. Last night's revelation Mr. Travers as the mastermind behind Charles's murder. Dr. Pennington's staged suicide, and the sapphire's theft had left the village buzzing. The truth was out, and Miss Marple felt the calm that came with a puzzle solved. Mrs. Bantry poured more tea, her eyes wide. "Jane, you're a wonder. Catching Travers like that, with his scar and the key, it's like a storybook. How do you do it?" Miss Marple smiled, her voice soft. "People, Dolly, are the same everywhere. Greed, fear, revenge, they leave marks." She thought of a St. Mary Mead grocer caught stealing because of a shaky hand. Travers' mud, his scar, the green thread, small things, but they told the story. The parlor was warm, with rose-patterned curtains and a crackling fire. Outside, villagers chatted, their voices lighter now. Inspector Craddock had called earlier, tying up the case. Travers was in custody, confessing more. He'd hidden the Harcourt sapphire in the manor's secret passage, planning to grab the fortune later. Craddock's men found the gem this morning, a blue spark in the velvet pouch Miss Marple had seen. It was back with Mrs. Harcourt, locked tight. Was it really the fortune Travers wanted? Mrs. Bantry asked, nibbling a scone. "All that gold George Harcourt hid." Miss Marple nodded, her eyes twinkling. "Gold and grudge, Dolly. Travers worked for George years ago, cheated out of a deal. He came back as a butler, quiet, waiting. Charles's nosing around threatened him, knew too much about the passage. Dr. Pennington, with his treasure talk, was a risk too." She thought of a St. Mary Mead feud that simmered for years, exploding over a small slight dot. Mrs. Bantry shivered. Poisoning Charles, faking Pennington's suicide, it's so cold. And poor Lydia, caught in the middle. Lydia was a pawn, Miss Marple said, her voice kind. Travers told her about the passage, knowing she'd look guilty. Her running to the library proved it. Lydia was cleared now, back at Willow Manor, teaching the children. She'd confessed to Craddock. She'd known Charles as a girl, a secret she hid to keep her job. No crime, just fear. Miss Marple thought of a St. Mary Mead maid who lied to save her place, human, not wicked. The tea was sweet, the scones warm. Mrs. Bantry leaned close. "That letter Jana won, about the theft being a lie, who sent it?" Miss Marple sipped her tea, her mind turning. "I suspect Lydia," she said. "Not sure, but she overheard Travers talking to Charles, maybe about the passage. Scared, she typed that note, hoping to warn someone." She thought of a St. Mary Mead letter that hinted at a theft, sent by a nervous witness, the shadow from the east. A guess, maybe, at Travers' grudge, tied to George's old deals in India. Mrs. Bantry gasped. "Lydia, she's braver than I thought. And Mrs. Harcourt, she seemed so angry." "Angry, yes," Miss Marple said, "but not guilty. She feared for her family's name, her sapphire. The green thread was Travers' trick, stolen from her scarf." She thought of a St. Mary Mead widow whose pride hid her pain. Mrs. Harcourt was shaken, but safe now. Her gem returned. The clock on the mantel struck 11. Its chime gentle. Miss Marple set her cup down, her scarf needles clicking. She felt the case settle, like a finished quilt. Travers' arrest, the sapphire's recovery, Lydia's truth-all, fit neat, like a St. Mary Mead puzzle with no loose ends. Mrs. Bantry sighed. "The village feels normal again, Jane. No more curses or strangers. Tommy's still talking about that scar, though calls Travers a pirate." Miss Marple laughed, soft and warm. Boys love villains. But Travers was just a man, bitter and greedy. She thought of the stranger. Tommy saw Travers, lurking to check his plan, his scar, his mud, his key little clues. But they trapped him, like a St. Mary Mead thief caught by a stray hair. Craddock's impressed, Mrs. Bantry said, grinning. Says you should join the police. What's next for you? Knitting, Miss Marple said, her eyes twinkling and watching. St. Mary Mead's quiet, but never dull. She thought of a St. Mary Mead scandal where gossip led to a truth. Villages, she knew, were full of stories, waiting for her to hear. Mrs. Bantry poured more tea. That sapphire, was it cursed, like Mrs. Clement said? No curse, Miss Marple said, just human trouble. The sapphire was a key, not to gold, but to Travers' plan. She thought of the passage, George's initials, the fortune's myth. Gold or not, it drove Travers to kill, like a St. Mary Mead treasure hunt that ended in a fight. The fire popped, cozy and bright. Miss Marple's needles moved, her mind calm. She saw Lydia's face, in her head relieved, but marked by fear. And Mrs. Harcourt, proud but broken, clutching her gem. Even Travers, his cold eyes hiding a burning hate. People, she thought, were the real mystery. Their hearts knotted with wants and wrongs. Mrs. Bantry yawned, stretching. Jane, you make it sound simple, but it's magic. 2 murders, a theft, and you solved it with tea and chatter. Not magic, Miss Marple said, smiling, just listening. People talk, Dolly, and their words show the truth. She thought of a St. Mary Mead tea, where a slip of tongue caught a liar. Travers.com, Lydia's panic. Mrs. Harcourt's snap haul spoke louder than they knew. A knock at the door startled them. It was Tommy, his face flushed, holding a basket. Miss Marple, Mom sent apples for you. Says you're a hero. He grinned, his eyes big dot. Miss Marple took the basket, her voice warm. Thank your mother, Tommy. No hero, just an old lady who notices things. She thought of his pirate talk, his stranger with a scar. Boys, she knew, saw clues where others didn't. Tommy ran off, shouting about pirates. Mrs. Bantry laughed. He's right, Jane. You're a hero. St. Mary Mead's lucky to have you. Lucky to have its people, Miss Marple said, her eyes soft. She thought of the village, its gossip, its fights, its heart. Willow Manor's case was done, but St. Mary Mead would always have more, like a scarf with endless stitches. The sun climbed higher, warming the parlor. Miss Marple finished her tea, her scarf growing. She saw Craddock's face in her mind, nodding as he cuffed Travers. And Raymond, her nephew, grinning at the passage's secret. Everyone played a part, she thought, like a St. Mary Mead play, where every line mattered. Mrs. Bantry stood, clearing cups. Another scone, Jane? Or are you off to solve another crime? Miss Marple chuckled. Scones for now, Dolly. Crimes can wait. But her eyes twinkled, knowing St. Mary Mead's quiet hid new puzzles. She thought of a St. Mary Mead garden where a lost ring started a mystery. Life, she knew, was never dull. The fire crackled, the clock ticked, and Miss Marple's needles moved, steady and sure. Travers was gone, the sapphire safe, Lydia free, and justice done. Willow Manor's shadows were gone, and St. Mary Mead was peaceful again. Miss Marple smiled, her kind face hiding a mind ready for the next thread to pull. In her village, truth always found its way, and she'd be there to meet it.